wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking all about bioidentical hormones. When you're on the fertility journey, you may have been told to take hormone replacement therapy. Maybe you've got mood swings or hot flashes or night sweats, irregular periods, PMS, and you're thinking maybe HRT can be part of your fertility toolkit. You're not really sure. Today, we are doing a call to action of what you can do right now to improve pregnancy success outcomes by including bioidentical hormones, different than the synthetic ones that your doctor's recommending, but bioidentical hormones, how this can improve the chances of natural pregnancy and improve the chances of pregnancy success at the clinic. Excited for you to listen. Let's go. Hey, Carol, excited to have you on the podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Great.
This is a little different twist from the usual perimenopause, menopause, PCOS. Maybe PCOS is close.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Awesome. Well,
PMS.
yeah, I'm excited to dig into this. We get a lot of questions about this topic. So talking about bioidentical hormones, how that can help someone that's really on the fertility journey. So first of all, let's talk about, well, how did you come to do this work?
Oh, quite accidentally, I guess. It's being like a little frustrated pharmacy, but I was actually getting recruited, but I didn't end up doing this to start this pharmacy. And it was a clinic based on Katarina Dalton's work on PMS. And the doctors Hargrove and Maxon published a paper showing that micronized progesterone delivered in an edible oil was absorbed, was effective. And so they were seeking to have PMS clinics with a PMS pharmacy. One of the investors came to the pharmacy I was working at and talked to me regularly about doing this, but a friend of mine actually did it. And he also would stop in and chit chat with me. And I remember, and he quoted to me later, I don't know if I could talk to women with PMS all day long, but I can and do. Everyone's a little bit different. It's been a challenging journey. What I learned from those early days that is somehow lost is that progesterone needs to be used in generous amounts to get the activity of progesterone you want. And along came Dr. John Lee, who wrote a nice book on progesterone, Multiple Roles of a Remarkable Hormone, if you want some solid background on it. But he said women don't need any more than 20 milligrams of progesterone. That's all your ovaries do. And then he went further and decided to throw his weight behind saliva testing. And we're 30 years out from those original saliva tests. And we still don't know why, when you put hormones on your skin, your saliva goes way up. And the trouble with lab testing in general is that we're making a big assumption that somehow a single number reflects your whole hormone milieu. It just isn't happening, and it's not right. And it's confounding to people who are like black and white, and that can be practitioners and patients. So our testing modalities are limited. The best tools we have is to understand what the hormones do, what they're capable of doing, and monitor the clinical results. And I always speak to patients and having issues that I know are hormone related from the complex symptoms they present. And I said, don't settle. You have to be completely happy. You have to be at the best that you can be with this hormone replenishment. So in conventional medicine, I'm seeing a lot of low doses being prescribed. Very early on in my career, I remember a woman coming in and she brought a prescription for 25 milligrams of progesterone. And her instructions were to start the progesterone when her pregnancy was confirmed. I go, oh, wow. At the same time, we are actually working with some fertility specialists, and they are using the PMS doses. They're using 100 milligrams 4 times a day. We had a letter from a Dr. Gary Frischman using 600 milligrams of progesterone for women wanting to get pregnant, using that much in their luteal phase. So I was quite upset with this 25 milligrams. And I sent her back to her doctor because not only would progesterone help the implant, because in the first part of the luteal cycle, it's helping support estrogen, making that endometrium acceptable to a fertilized egg. So you need it then. And then if a pregnancy does occur, you very much need it to protect that fertilized egg to help it grow and flourish. And so it made no sense to give her 25 milligrams, a tiny dose, after the pregnancy is confirmed. I mean, she'd get a little activity, but why aren't we going for real support if somebody is struggling, trying to get pregnant? It got me into trouble. I got a visit from the state board. I said, okay, but I have this experience with real fertility doctors, not this haphazard doctor, and how he's prescribing it could be better. And I sent this patient back to the doctor to get more progesterone prescribed. So all of that was really the infertility issues, the PMS, the PCOS, etc. All of this is really dramatically helped with progesterone because it's really the hormone that is in deficit, and we need to shore up. I could tell you another story.
Let's go. Yeah.
So how about a little later? Premature ovarian failure. So at the time, this woman called. She was using a combination of estradiol, 0.5 milligram, progesterone, 100 milligrams, twice a day, every day, because she was told she was in menopause. She was like that from her like 38, 39, and she was now 40, 41. So she calls, and she called because she said, I'm bleeding. I go, when are you bleeding? And as some women are, not everybody is, they're pretty careful about marking when they bleed. And sure enough, for the last 3 months, she had bled every month right on time. And I said, please go back and get an ovulation kit because I think you may be ovulating again. I learned this too from those PMSers, those earlier PMSers too. So she actually was starting to ovulate again. The ovarian cycle was going. I theorized that having the hormone there gave the proper signals to the pituitary gland, or maybe the hypothalamus, who knows? Somebody else can do all that research, but it was sufficient enough to get someone restarted. The same thing, I thought PMS was forever. Once you had PMS, if you didn't have progesterone, you're in big trouble. But as it happened, after a while, as I worked there, women would phone in and say, I had PMS and I took progesterone from you before and it worked very well. But now I'm coming into my perimenopausal years and the symptoms are coming back. Can I take progesterone again? I'm like, wait a minute, coming back? Weren't you taking progesterone all this time? No. As younger women, if you can support that progesterone, there is some opportunity for things to reset correctly. And off you go on your own and you're not dependent on supplements anymore.
Yeah. So with the premature ovarian insufficiency, so she ended up cycling it. Do you know if she went on to conceive or like what happened there? But
I don't know the rest of the story.
But she didn't have a cycle, and then all of a sudden it came back. Well, yeah, we see that all the time too, right? Where people are like, "Sorry, it's POF." I'm like, or POI. Is it really, or is there something else going on in there, right? And you start to address all the underlying missed healing opportunities where conventional medicine just tells you, "Sorry, it's donor eggs for you." Yeah, it's like this holistic approach, digging in deeper. Okay, so with the bioidenticals, let's try to talk about the synthetic versus bioidentical, what are you seeing there and kind of the difference? And I think like a big study came out, was it in 2000 or something like that, talking about, scared women and sort of said, this HRT, hormone replacement therapy, it was a higher risk of cancer. And so everybody panicked and said, oh my goodness, I'm not taking any of this stuff, and ran away from it. And now it seems all very scary. So I guess maybe address some of that stuff.
Yeah, well, nor should you. It was the Women's Health Initiative. And at a time when bioidentical hormones were in use and there are more drug companies making actual bioidentical hormone products, the Women's Health Initiative, one of the largest test groups ever put together, chose to use Premarin and Provera. I'm using brand names, Premarin conjugated horse estrogens, which turns out not to be just estrogen. I have a study with about 60 molecules in there, all resembling cholesterol-like molecules, some estrogenic, some like progesterone, some like testosterone. So it's a mishmash. And then medroxyprogesterone acetate is a alternative to progesterone. And they would sometimes use this instead of progesterone in the luteal phase. It's vastly different. It's a water-soluble molecule compared to progesterone's fat-soluble, and needs to get into your head for all the mood things and your mind working correctly. Medroxyprogesterone completely knocks that out. You certainly don't want that kind of thing in your body. Because we're talking about fertility things, there used to be a time, I'm old enough to know this, and this was off-label use of medroxyprogesterone acetate. If you thought you were pregnant, your doctor might prescribe you 10 days of medroxyprogesterone acetate. And if at the end of that time you bled, you were not pregnant. But if you didn't bleed, then they would check into pregnancy. That practice ultimately was abandoned because they found that they were actually creating birth defects with that foreign progestin in babies who had this medroxyprogesterone acetate in the first place. So that off-label use fell out of favor. Not too many people know this. You have to be around for a long time. So it's a change in the molecule. It's not the right molecule. Your body makes sex hormones, adrenal hormones, vitamin D, bile, all from cholesterol. And they have specific shapes and sizes and fit into the receptors exactly. So unfortunately, we reward drug companies for altering molecules, and then we let them convince us that they're somehow better than the real one that we were born to use. So another example might be testosterone. Methyl testosterone used to be in use in the US. And even at the time, most countries in the world had abandoned it. But for a long time in the US, it kept on with Premarin, with methyl testosterone, and Estratest, methyl testosterone. The trouble was the methyl testosterone, not testosterone, was terribly liver toxic and produced liver cancers. Hence avoiding it. They gave it up in men's health for early on, but we kept putting this liver toxic altered hormone in women's bodies long afterwards. It's rather atrocious, but the power of marketing actually is just really, really astounding. So non-bioidentical is an alteration to that original structure of whatever hormone it is. So another thing you can't do if you use non-bioidentical hormones, let's use, for example, birth control pills, a non-bioidentical estrogen, a non-bioidentical progestin. What happens if you try to take a serum level of your estrogen and progesterone? Well, you're not going to get any. You can forget about testing because those foreign hormones have blocked your production. It's filling in the receptors for your real hormones. So all your own natural hormone production is suppressed by the birth control pill. Yet you get quite a few estrogen-like activities, progesterone-like activities but not the full complement of what the real hormones can do.
And then the HRT piece on that. So yeah, I was diagnosed with POI at 28. I had both my kids with donor eggs. Years later, discovered from a functional medicine, functional nutrition, gut infections and thyroid issues and blood sugar and chronic stress, all this piece. So was on birth control for years, then switched over to HRT, and then finally found some bioidenticals in the last little while to help. But I still felt fine. I didn't really have a lot of the symptoms because I'd made so many of the other changes. But we still need to have those hormones. I think if I had had it right all along, then I probably wouldn't have been able to have my own children. But again, I didn't discover this until years later, or my own biological children, I should say. So I guess from the synthetic HRT that's currently out there that people are taking, because a lot of people are taking if they have mood swings or hot flashes or night sweats, and then you go on HRT, especially if you have diminished ovarian reserve and premature ovarian insufficiency, to help with those symptoms. And then the idea then is to kind of wean off of them as you start to support your body be able to make those foundational changes. So let me just talk about what that HRT is as opposed to the one we're talking about, the bioidentical.
Um, so, so you're talking about some of the atrocities that are happening as as women are aging,
right?
Well, let's first start about women having excessive bleeding, because this happens often in perimenopause. And this, if you go to conventional medicine, you are on a downhill slide all the way to having your uterus removed and perhaps your ovaries removed as well. And what's really happening there, progesterone is not only an ovarian hormone, it's made substantially by your adrenal glands, and that's happening in the follicular time, day 1 of bleeding to mid-cycle. And you start building up higher levels of the endometrium. And when you get to the luteal phase, you're shedding that endometrium that you just built up, and it can be very, very heavy bleeding. I've known young women to have blood transfusions every month. Pretty serious. And the key to this is progesterone. A couple of months with plenty of progesterone in the first part of the cycle will stop that overgrowth of the endometrium, and you'll restart normal cycling as long as you keep that up. Why has that gotten lower? It's gotten lower because of stressors of one sort or another. And I just talked to an 18-year-old girl. She's been having trouble with her cycles since she was 14. Before that, she was fine. What happened at 14? COVID infection and COVID vaccine, which we're seeing a lot of disruption of our menstrual cycles, and our fertility has really taken a big hit. I'm sure you've seen that in your patient population. So then as you go along, first of all, doctors completely ignore that part. Or they might give you an IUD with a progestin in it, hoping to stop the bleeding, but it doesn't always work. But now you've knocked out your own progesterone too. Then some doctors will put you on birth control pills in your later perimenopausal years. Rather than fixing the problem with real hormones, they put in the synthetic hormones. Situation's even worse if you are gotten a diagnosis of PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is kind of the emotional side of PMS. It's a bit complicated, but these women are told to avoid progesterone at any cost. It's dangerous for them. They need SSRIs, the selective serotonin receptor inhibitors, which maybe helps the mood a little bit, but doesn't solve the problem. And pretty soon they're on sleep aids, they're on antidepressants, they're on anti-anxiety drugs. They use drugs like Lupron to block all hormones because it'll stop you from making progesterone, and they'll give them back a little estrogen, making them more estrogen dominant, more progesterone deficient, certainly not relieved of any of their symptoms. And when that doesn't work, as it could be predicted, they're offered a hysterectomy with a oophorectomy. Some of these women are childless because of this endless drug medley that they've been exposed to, when in fact progesterone was the key for them. It's a very sad story.
Yeah, it's like one, you have side effects from one, and then you're just chasing it with all these different, like, huge laundry list of yeah, medication, and the sleep, and then everything starts going off, like you're saying. Okay, and so what are you seeing as far as, so we're gonna get the bioidenticals. What are we looking for there? I guess as someone who's trying to conceive, what would be your, like, what are you looking for as when you start to develop a protocol there for someone?
Okay, so somebody trying to conceive, I'd start with a basic like 400 milligrams of oral capsules. If you were using creams, that probably make the same recommendation, or suppositories. Katarina Dalton did 400, 600 milligram suppositories for those women. You would want to, at your endpoint, you would want all kinds of PMS type symptoms to be totally eradicated. Your premenstrual time should be not noticeable at all. It should be a nothing burger. And not too many women have that, but I think that's a good indicator that you may have enough. If you use capsules, you can measure in the serum, you can measure a rise in the blood to a luteal level at 400 milligrams, which would be about in US 20 nanograms per deciliter. So you can see that you're actually able to sustain a level, and that should be given in divided doses so that level stays up, not taking it all at bedtime, which leaves you part of the day not covered. So you don't want to do that. So you would increase until the symptoms really are relieved, and then double check that you have at least a good luteal level. And then what happens when you get pregnant? What do? You stay on the progesterone. Katarina Dalton did do this with her severe PMS patients. She kept them on their dose of progesterone during the first trimester. The mom's body is responsible for all the progesterone needed. And then after the first trimester, the placenta also makes it, and the progesterone rises really, really high. There's some evidence now, and I'm hearing about it, that if you're nauseous during pregnancy, could be relieved with additional progesterone. What rises in early pregnancy very fast is estriol. That particular estrogen is popping up really high, and if your contribution of progesterone is just not great enough, you can have nausea from the expression of that estrogen. So progesterone could be used very safely for nausea. Katarina Dalton, on top of what she did there, kept her PMSers on progesterone. She did a study on the babies. By now they were 10 years old. And she looked for how successful they were in school and their socialization. And she found those babies, now 10 years old, superior to their peers in everything except sports. So when there's any cause to worry about the ability to carry a baby, I think extra progesterone would be really beneficial. I have a question for you. Okay, so levels of progesterone considered to be pregnancy level, maybe at least 40 nanograms per mil. I think I said deciliter before. I think it's milliliter. So at least 40. And then I think in textbook, at least what I used to read, that during pregnancy it could go all the way up to 200, 250, something like that. I recently saw some lab tests that the pregnancy levels were as high as 550. And I thought, wow, this is really, really interesting that it's even higher in the real world. The other stuff was textbook. And then I began to wonder if there's not some place where there's like a sweet spot that you should at least get somewhere for the best possible baby, the happiest baby, the calmest baby you could have after pregnancy. I don't know if you have an opinion on that or if there's something you look for, but I would love to know.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually as far as what but it is interesting with um, to me when you work on all this stuff ahead of time, that's when I just did a podcast interview with someone talking about like you can impact the symmetry of the baby's face, that all the health of the gut microbiome, all the work we're doing ahead of time. And so if you've reduced all these symptoms with the diet and lifestyle changes, adding in some bioidenticals, and then the pregnancy is you feel better, you're calmer, and then is it the fact that all the stress hormones weren't coming in, right? And then did that impact the health of the baby? I know, like for myself, I didn't work on any of this stuff. Both my kids have ADD, because we had them through donor eggs, obviously through using hormones. Was I stressed out during that time? I would have used the conventional the synthetic hormones to prepare for pregnancy at that time, and wasn't using any bioidenticals. No one even knew what that was back 25 years ago. I don't think anyone knew like what that was. And so to me, all the work you're doing, like we're doing ahead of time, that is impacting pregnancy's outcomes and then complications and postpartum. Like my thyroid was all out of whack, and we see this with thyroid. Maybe we'll get into this a little bit too. With like my thyroid. So then when I was trying to breastfeed, I've been like pumping all day long, going, why is this not working? Well, my thyroid, I believe, I don't know for sure, but would have like impeded the milk flow. And it was like, at one point, my child at like 4 months, I didn't realize she was like skinny as heck because I wasn't getting enough breast milk, and then I had to supplement. And I believe if I had have worked on all these things ahead of time, it just helps everything. I've got people telling me, on postpartum, they weren't even able to bond with their child because they were having postpartum anxiety, depression, like all this stuff. And if we get the hormones in check and everything balanced beforehand, instead of rushing off, like I just talking to someone again before this, like rushing off thinking that IVF is the solution to all this piece, when the solution is all like every single time. And we want the pill and all thing, but the solution is always your health. And if we can help it along with these bioidentical piece and hormones to be able to get the body in place, like why wouldn't we do this instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars pushing our body? And then and there's studies that people like IVF kids they're struggling in some ways because the mother's body wasn't ready and we pushed it. So
yeah, and IVF mothers have greater risks of cancer later on. It's just horrific. I'm glad you brought up thyroid because that's a big player too, and the demands for thyroid from the mom like doubles during pregnancy. And if you fail to make that, you're going to have a hypothyroid kid, which is not going to thrive as much as a healthy kid. And so we kind of generationally, we become more and more hypothyroid. And another thing with the low thyroid, you could lose your baby without enough thyroid being made. So that's one of the areas that absolutely should be optimized before you get pregnant. And my husband was a physician in alternative stuff. He actually did help a few couples with doing just that. But he said, give it a year to prepare your body for its best optimal shape. There's another little thing with progesterone that probably not a lot of people know. There was a big interest in the hormone relaxin there for a while, and relaxin was being used as a supplement, and it was being used in sports, like your muscles went seize up after over working and stuff. But relaxin is the hormone that causes the cervical ripening. And guess what signals relaxin? It's progesterone. The progesterone levels, even way at the end when they're high, it has to be high enough to make plenty of relaxin for you so that process doesn't have to be as painful. And he did have one one woman we helped, and she took some relaxant too at the end. Her first pregnancy was a terrible delivery for her. Her second was easy and just so much happier. She was dreading having to go through that again. So even that, preparing for delivery and then preparing for postpartum. Postpartum, your hormones like ka-chunk. Your progesterone's been at high levels. What if you've been at 500 and then you go to zero because you've had stress uh, getting some of the adrenal hormones down, and you're not going to ovulate for a while, so you don't get that progesterone. There's other parts of your body that make progesterone you're never really without, but you really take a huge dive, and postpartum depression is real and serious. I remember in Toronto, a young psychiatrist, I think she was in her 30s, with a newborn baby, jumped in front of a subway.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I just cried because I know that in her world, maybe she was probably offered drugs, nothing else. Progesterone would have helped her recover in pretty generous doses. It's harmless to use it if you're breastfeeding. She was the daughter of psychiatrists, so I think she was stuck in a world without the information of how your body really works. It's a senseless death, and it happens. Just hugely sad. So I've become convinced that we're somehow neglecting looking at progesterone throughout our lifetimes, where it's so important for men and women and children. Let me just say, you mentioned ADD kids. A little progesterone will help them because they have overexpression of adrenaline, and progesterone is a balancer for adrenaline. So if you wanted to bring some calmness to your kids and allow them to think and do things in a much happier, less stressful fashion, you can give progesterone to children. You can give progesterone to a colicky baby. Same thing. It's such a safe thing to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like I remember at one point my son, when he was like 10 or 11, I swear to goodness, every kid that came over was on freaking
Yeah,
Adderall or some sort of medication, and then they were all selling it, and just complete insanity. But like they're all on this stuff, and they'd come over, and their little eyeballs they'd be little zombies.
right. And drugs like Ritalin are producing heart attacks in 15-year-olds. It's very unsafe kind of drugging, which is too bad.
So what is there? So are there any negative side effects with progesterone? Like what are you seeing there as to who shouldn't use it? When, what would be some negative pieces about it?
Okay, I already said every man, woman, and child could use it. And the only danger, I've written a blog about this. If you underuse progesterone, you could intensify the estrogen effects. If you're loaded with lots of estrogen, or even if you're just unbalanced with too little progesterone, as soon as you add some progesterone, you like light up the estrogen activity. I think you also light up the adrenaline activity. I don't think that's been teased out, but there's many reports of a little bit of progesterone, and women end up in the emergency room thinking they're dying of a heart attack because their hearts are beating out of their chest, and they're panicking. They're sure they're going to die. Nothing's wrong with them except that they've intensified some things, but the progesterone they used was simply inadequate for checking on doing everything that it needed to do, including balance the enhanced estrogen effect and the enhanced adrenaline effect. It's just simply not enough. So sometimes you never see it. If you start high enough, you don't see it at all. If you start low, that's when women come to think they can't take progesterone, they're sensitive to it, they're allergic to it. They never want to go through that experience again, and it's the very thing they need, but they need it in high doses. One Facebook group called this phenomenon estrogen kickback. I've seen it in the medical literature, called the progesterone inversion. Small doses produce an adverse effect, large doses produce the effect you want. So that's the danger, and I think it's a it's a constant danger. You can find over-the-counter progesterone creams in low doses, 16 milligrams, 20 milligrams, 30 milligrams. For somebody who has a significant progesterone deficiency, that amount is very easily going to cause a problem. And they, of course, do not know that more is better and just quit. And it'll take a couple of weeks even to recover from that little misadventure, being miserable all the time. And the very thing they need to help them, they don't get.
Because
For
usually,
example, those emergency room visits. Why aren't the ER docs giving them a dose of progesterone?
and because usually they'll say to take the progesterone with estrogen. Like, what are you seeing around like with that? It's usually like the standard of care where you got to take it together. Like, what do you see there?
Normally, this is kind of interesting. Dr. Jerry Lynn Pryor from the University of British Columbia, she's published a study demonstrating that women in perimenopause have the highest levels of estrogen in their whole lifespan. That's really not till you stop menstruating that you really see some significant drops in estrogen. And I think you should help yourself with estrogen. Your aging will be much better, but you already need progesterone as early as your late 20s, early 30s. Women are becoming progesterone deficient. That's the first hormone to drop. That's the first hormone to use. And that's a hormone that will relieve hot flashes, not the estrogen. Estrogen probably has a tiny role to play, but we got into this estrogen for hot flashes probably because Premarin, which I spoke about before, was approved for vasomotor things. I think it's more a lack of progesterone, and I saw this on your website, which I thought was very interesting because I'm seeing this too. It's insulin resistance. And having a drop in glucose shoots up that adrenaline effect. And then there are a significant amount of us that don't metabolize adrenaline well enough. It needs methylation, and we're poor methylators. So that can be a serious problem. So in that preparation to be a healthy mom and have healthy kids, it's really essential to go to the two most potent hormones first, insulin, glucose, and make sure that's in balance and that you don't have these mild swings, which will be inducing hot flashes, night sweats.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that as a theme, right? I just myself tried out the continuous glucose monitor to see what was happening, when I was eating and how that was spiking some of my blood sugar. Like, I have a pretty decent diet, but it was like, oh, okay, I can see it when I had a little bit of pasta, or in my case, it was like cherries, just like blew the thing out the water. So you can see people are just on this roller coaster all day long, like eating a whole basket full of carbs and bread and wondering why, your ovulation's off and your cycle's off. Then you get the hot flashes and it's getting worse. Then you spiral that, oh my goodness, you're in menopause and it's over and you'll never have your baby. And meanwhile, if we start doing these things, right, I get people all the time. It's horrible. And then you have that AMH number that's stuck in your brain, thinking, you've got diminished ovarian reserve, or you got low reserve, and there's no hope. And meanwhile, we haven't dug deep enough, and the AMH is only gonna have you push towards IVF. We haven't dug into why it's low to begin with. We see it go up all the time. Okay, and so as far as the okay, and so how do we test to determine the amount needed? Like, what are you doing to kind of develop your protocols? What do we start? Like, how do we start?
Well, I would in general say start at least 400 milligrams in the luteal phase when you're treating that, and go up from there. If symptoms warrant, you should have a painless luteal phase, and if anything remains, just go up. It could be adequate. With PCOS, you have a lot of infertility problems because of no ovulation. I had a colleague who got a diagnosis of PCOS, and she got her prescription of progesterone 100 milligram capsules as we were compounding, and she said, how should I take this, do you think? And I said, start right now. You don't know where you are. She hadn't had a bleed in a long time. And I said, start it 100 milligrams 4 times a day till you bleed, stop for 2 weeks and restart. Well, she did. And that next cycle she got pregnant. It was just that fast. It was that amount of progesterone allowed her to ovulate for the next cycle. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting when I started taking it, just from a personal standpoint, it's like I was taking it at bedtime and I was taking 100 and it was like I was in a freaking coma. And I had no problem sleeping. And the next day I'm like crawling, like, why am I so tired? So I reduced and feels better. Um, but
Um,
yeah, what do you think of that one? And it's like
yeah,
being told to take it at bedtime and not throughout the day. But yeah, what are you seeing there?
okay, so a couple things. Um, some number of women will produce enough allopregnenolone, a metabolite of progesterone, that will make them quite groggy. It's very powerful at the GABA receptors. Can really knock you right out. It's thought to be as strong as phenobarbital, the allo part. And we find that this happens most frequently when you do oral progesterone. So if that's occurring, we recommend going to topical with a cream or going to lozenges, sublingual sprays,
Okay.
vaginal or rectal inserts to get away from that grogginess. I talked to Jerry Lynn Pryor again about this grogginess, and she thinks it also occurs when there's been a sleep deficit. That progesterone finally allows you to sleep, and therefore your body's trying to make you sleep, and that effect will wear off. I have heard of it wearing off too, so I don't know. Also, could be dose related. Maybe if you were given a big dose at bedtime, break up the doses throughout the day, which I think has merit, and have a smaller dose each time. Somebody gifted me some progesterone capsules, and I experienced that for the first time. One morning, I decided to take 250 milligrams. And in no time at all, I was like, I was drunk. I had a trainer come over and he goes, "What's wrong with you? You're, you're like drunk." And I said, "Yeah, from this progesterone." I said, I need to work out anyway. I want to work out to help metabolize it quicker. I said, "We've got to be careful because I feel dizzy and not quite with it." And then right afterwards, I ate a very big breakfast, lots of eggs and some bacon, and then just passed.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like with the sleep piece where I always had great sleep, I thought, but then and now this progesterone, I'm like, damn, night night. And now I feel like but I always was maybe like 8 or 9 hours, and now it's maybe more eight and like 7 o'clock. I'm like, boom, let's party. I don't know. I just feel and I'm pretty energetic to begin with, right? Because people are like, oh, they looked at my cortisol, like, wow, this is a disaster. I'm like, I still feel okay. But with this progesterone piece, and then it does seem to be just making me go into a little even more of a coma and like dreaming and all that stuff. So it's really low. I'm also on thyroid medication and all this sort of stuff too. So trying to fix the doses there. Anyways, this POI thing, it's been a continual thing my whole life, trying to figure all this stuff out that no one knew what was going on. So I assembled a whole team to really help people with this, because like I didn't discover any of this stuff until later. I was given, the sorry, it's donor eggs, there's nothing you can do. And then being able to, and I didn't really, I believe back then for me it was like thyroid that stress, that I didn't even think I was stressed. But yeah, so I think it's to have this toolkit to be able to say that there is something to do. It's not about pumping your body full of hormones. It's there if you need it, but let's work on the health to begin with. So I guess kind of for first of all, how do we access these? Because trying to find the compounding pharmacies and the bioidentical hormones, and people are like, what's that? Where do we get it from? And your doctor will be like, well, no, here's a synthetic form. Off you go. And then you wonder why things don't work. So how do we even get them?
So, in you want to talk about Canada or the U.S.?
Yeah, let's talk about the U. I'm in Canada, but like a lot of our listeners here in the U.S. So let's talk about the U.S., Canada, and Europe. Let's do all three.
Okay, so in the U.S., you can check with the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding, which is a group. You can look for their members for bioidentical hormones. Not every compounder specializes in this area, but a lot of them do. If you need it compounded, there are FDA approved products There's oral prometrium, which is unfortunately in peanut oil, and there's generics for it. There's a vaginal product called Crinone, which was actually designed by one of my professors in pharmacy school. He first designed this emollient thing called, he marketed it as Replens, the idea that this gel would stick to the vaginal walls longer. And then he also did a lot of research on progesterone. And so he incorporated progesterone into that product. So you have, hopefully, that gel is holding the progesterone there longer, so you get more absorption. So that's been a successful product. So and we also have quite a few companies now making over-the-counter products, which include progesterone, includes estradiol. You can get estradiol without a prescription. You can get estriol, which is best for vaginal dryness. Of all the estrogens, you can get DHEA in the US. You can get pregnenolone as a precursor to progesterone. DHEA is your most abundant adrenal hormone. And that's another place to look when men or women aren't thriving. You should check DHEA levels to see what's going on. And I'd like to back up, if I can sneak this in. I've been noticing that I have clients with a lot of hormone deficiencies and their cholesterol's too low. And maybe you've seen that too. And that's really important. Your diet's important. If you're vegan, you're not going to have a good cholesterol, and you're not going to be able to procreate very easily, not without a lot of help. And I've seen astonishing low cholesterol levels. And I wonder how people even walk around. They're not able to make hormones and repair their body. One of the things, they don't measure cholesterol during your pregnancy, because your cholesterol does go way high because you need it, because now you're creating another body. And if you were to test, then you'd go right into a statin recommendation, which would kill you and your fetus probably. Anyway, it's tough business, and I see too many women now too are being told that they need to bring down the cholesterol level. It's entirely not right, and it really does affect your fertility as well. So
Agree. Building blocks, the hormones are the cholesterol, right? We're lowering them, and we're not.
Yeah, so these are my tools. Now, with helping people without a practitioner that can prescribe, I can help with prescribers and telling them what to use. But I've been reliant on the over-the-counter products. I'm reliant on coaching people on how to eat so they don't have the insulin glucose things. I'm also pretty often recommending methylation, help with methylated B vitamins or betaine hydrochloride. It's getting to be kind of routine. I'm seeing that a lot.
So do we.
And then progesterone might be able to correct the thyroid problem, but might not. So I don't do that the first look. I try to see if progesterone will help the thyroid work. You check by testing or monitor body temperatures or pulse rate for thyroid. And this and a couple other supplements have been my tools. And mostly, if you do listen to me, you can get better. I do have trouble with women still. As I say, you've got to use more generous progesterone. They have this other program running in their head, like, oh, I'm a sensitive person, I have to use less. So what do they do but provoke the very thing that's I warn them about, that they shouldn't do, and it makes it worse for them. And then they're not happy, and nor should they be. But they have to make this leap into, I've got to really understand how beneficial this hormone is for me, and really use it appropriately to get good results.
I feel like we could talk all day here. So the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding in the States, and then Canada and Europe. I don't know if you have anything quick on those two.
There used to be a compounding group in Canada too, and I don't know how active they are. I know a couple compounders in the Toronto area.
Yeah, I found a pharmacy in my area. I guess in Europe, same thing. So basically, search that compounding pharmacy, and being able then, I guess, find practitioners from there. But
Right. That's a clue. You can ask the pharmacist who they're doing compounding for, and then find your way back to a
yeah.
practitioner.
And then so you've got a free 15-minute consult that you offer here where people can talk about this with you. So we'll have the link in there for there to book. But any final thoughts for us here today, Carol, on our topic that is like immense, but there's I think really some simple takeaways on here, i.e. take progesterone and really see how it can help you. But anything you wanted to say as far as a takeaway?
Oh, I really want nobody to have to suffer needlessly. Well, like the truth is out there. What was the X-Files said that or something like that? The truth is out there. The truth really is progesterone is extremely valuable hormone, and so are the other hormones when they're in deficit. So at any point in your life, if there's things going awry, you should really dig into and see if hormones are involved. I think if you go to a primary physician, they should add a complete hormone profile to their blood chemistry and their blood differential. In fact, you could even throw out the lipids and just just use the hormones. It should be part of a regular medical workup, and you'll find answers to a lot of problems that are simply being overlooked.
Love it. Thanks so much for all the work that you're doing.
Oh, thanks, Sarah, for having me. I really appreciate it.